So out of the 30 years that I've been living, there's only been a handful of times of me being in front of the camera, and this is one of those moments. Growing up in Daly City, we had an actual filmmaker who lived in the corner of our house, of our block, and he was the one who was in charge of leading all the kids in the neighborhood to do all of these homemade movies. What started as Kid Heroes 1, 2, the trilogy, eventually became a movie called Lumpia. So my first experience was seeing, being the youngest in the group, my experience was being among all these kids and just seeing what movie making was all about. Budgets were not existing then, so boom poles were attached to those tubes at the end of the, for the Christmas, like the gift wrapper. And so literally a microphone, like a karaoke microphone was being hung from there. And so a friend would boom that over to record sound, for example. So things like that, using wheelchairs, and it's funny because that's still being used today. Wheelchairs were used back then. I think it was like a grandma's wheelchair, used as a dolly. And that was my first real experience with being among a filmmaker. And being among that, I think, helped me trying to figure out, okay, you can be creative and you can do so many ways, different ways to basically accomplish one thing. Growing up, I naturally was leaning towards the creative side. I was always drawing, I was always creating something, even inventing, if I may say. But as a Filipino kid, I think for the majority of us, we're kind of led to a different path. And I would say a different path as in the standard path. And what I also mean by that is either you're going to medical, maybe a lawyer, but it usually is medical. I always kind of go towards the, well, do you think I'm Filipino? And they go, yes. And I go, well, if there's one stereotype, which is totally fine, what would you think, what would you think that I studied? And so some of them are kind, they'll be like a doctor, a lawyer. And I go, well, yeah, keep going, keep going. And eventually I would say, oh yeah, I was actually a nursing student. So I do have a degree, funny enough, in nursing. I went to USF here in San Francisco. Throughout high school, as far as where I begun to use my creativity towards using a camera was when in my sophomore year, my buddy of mine was throwing teen club events. And at that time, I was shooting with my mom's Pentax K1000. And he goes, hey, would you want to shoot for these parties that I'm throwing? For my time, I had a 2 megapixel camera plus a high 8 recording these teen club events. And at that time, my friend was paying me pretty good money. I would say like a few $100s for every night. So every time I got paid, I just kept upgrading. So come college, as I mentioned with a typical path for a Filipino kid, I didn't know what to do. I think asking to go into an art school was probably well beyond for my mom, a single mom. So I could not go that route. And so with his help with scholarships and all that good stuff, I did go to USF for the nursing program. But if you are typically a student, ideally you should be working. My mom's philosophy was that as a student, that is your primary job. There is no job, just focus on that. And so I did not have a job at, there's an asterisk to that. I did not have a job during college, but I would always work events. So I always get hired to photograph an event, usually it'd be photo, and every now and then to do video. And so I would do that. And that's pretty much my only job was throughout college was to photograph events and make money from there. So throughout college, I've been photographing events and making money off of that. And despite being in nursing school, I actually, at one point in my time, really despised it. And so I actually applied for Academy of Art. But what I learned right away was that the government can only support one degree. So if anyone out there is listening, you can only afford one if you've applied to any FAFSA loans or whatnot. So when the time came for graduation, I did finally pass the exit exam. So if anyone out there is thinking of nursing, there is an exit exam. And so despite failing 3 times there, I think this is where people start to know what career direction I ended up taking. I did graduate, and then of course the boards come in, which is the NCLEX. Failed that twice, and I figured, okay, I think God doesn't want me to become a nurse, so I'm gonna do what I've been doing since high school, since my duration in college. And that's basically picking up a camera, hustling in terms of getting clients, working with them, and then basically creating opportunities in order for me to work with people and use the camera to make money. So after graduating and after failing a few times, I was also welcomed to the real world where you're supposed to make money at this point. So tail in between my legs, I came up with a creative resume and ended up in a tech company in San Francisco that had nothing to do with photos, either a camera. So that tail in between my legs meant that I was working the front door. I was an administrator, so the front desk receptionist, so to speak. But the title was called Office Happiness Assistant. So it sounded somewhat better than a receptionist, no offense. So I did that for about a few years. Every time a person in tech came in, sort of slipped it in that I was doing photo and video, but it never looked good because why am I behind this desk welcoming you? So I always thought that was a good try, a good attempt to work with people, but I was never in the right position to do that. But lucky enough, the head of marketing at that company did recognize that this is what I've been doing on the side, and so she did offer an actual an assistant producer position, something along those lines, for the company's studio. We had an in-house studio. It's like any other job, if you're not 100% fully there and fully committed and fully passionate about it, you kind of grow tired from that. And so that's what happened with this job. I liked it, but I definitely did not love it. And so after 3 years being in this company, I was just not really feeling it. And so one morning when we woke up, me and my wife asking each other, what do you got going for the week? I was just like, well, I'm kind of tired of this job, but you know, I'm coming in a little bit later. And she's like, just quit. And I go, are you serious? Like, I can quit? And funny enough, she's Filipino, she's a nurse. So this does help in to have a partner who can help and believe. But when she said that, that kind of gave me, of course, the opportunity and the permission to kind of follow what I felt that I wanted to do, which is work with people and just create my own opportunities and take the camera and make money from that. And in terms of my personality, I'm one of those who is kind of calculated. I want to see, of course, like what is my path? I want to make sure that if I were to leap, that net that people say that, oh, you know, the net will catch you. I personally want to make sure that that net was there, even before I would just have that leap of faith. Whereas from other people, I would feel they have a stronger personality, or at least they have a stronger belief or a sense of belief that if I'm going to do something like this, the opportunities will happen. And for me, I just was kind of scared. I think, in all honesty, that's probably the best description of who I was back then was, I don't think I can do it, so I'm going to keep doing this. And then over the weekends or late at night, that's where I'll do my work and find other clients. But having my wife, who was thankfully supportive and gave me the permission, really helped me push myself into my own career. So after having that permission from my wife to leave, I'm now welcome into the world of freelancing. And so at this point, I've already started delving more into video. My main background, my main thing that I was doing first of all was doing photography. So I've done events. If you've done events, you kind of go into to weddings. And so I was a part of that world at the late end of high school and during college. And if you do that, you also do portraits. But by this time when I had left, I had started to do more video. And so this is where I can pitch to clients photo and video. And so having talked to a friend in terms of coming up with a name, 845 kind of stood out. And so that's the name of the company that I started, doing commercial photo and video, which also led to the corporate world. And so where I find myself now is basically still doing photography for clients, but also working and creating either commercials or commercial testimonial pieces utilizing video. So now that I had made the decision to leave my daytime job, I was now pretty much thrown into the world of freelancing. And there are two camps who knew that I had a nursing degree. One is you should still pass your NCLEX because you can always use it as a backup plan. And then the other camp is never have a backup plan, because if you have a backup plan, you'll just fall right into it. So instead of going through to what you want to do, because you have that safety net, you're always gonna be reminded that, okay, I don't have to go all hard on this thing, either this career I want. Instead, you kind of have that liberty to kind of fall back on this backup plan. And so those are the two camps I was always faced and always reminded. My mom was, of course, on the part where you went to school for this, you might as well just get the degree and finish it. And that way, if the time comes, you can always go to a hospital and get a job, which is true. You go anywhere in the world and you could probably find a job fairly quickly. Whereas others who have built businesses off of their own backs, they're the ones who are always reminding me, like, don't have a backup plan. If this is something that you really want to do, just do it. And 5 years later, I'm still freelancing. I started my own company, which is 845, and it is a photo and video company that specializes in producing all these good stuff for companies based out of San Francisco. And what I want is to see someone like myself either in front of or behind the camera. And it's not because I can just say that person's Filipino. I think it's more so because we just need to let people know that we are capable, or frankly, do whatever we want to do. I think Filipinos as a whole, we're just a special type of caring people. And I think that's why we're really good nurses or doctors and lawyers and whatnot, or basically medical field. Let's just stick with that. But if you are passionate about anything else other than that, I think that's something that's worth doing. And then not because you're breaking the mold. It's not about doing something different just to do something different. I think it's more so if you're really good at it and if you're passionate about it, that in itself will translate into your career. In anything that you do, you're either an amateur or professional. And an amateur, the root of that word is, it does mean love. And so you're doing it for the love of something. So for some people, when they pick up a camera, there are two routes. It's basically, I love it, and so I'll do it, and I'm an amateur photographer. And even though there's a bad connotation with the word amateur, that's what it really means. It's basically for you to love to do what you're doing. And then you have the other side of it, which is a professional. And by its definition is that you solely rely on that as your main income. Culturally, our parents, and for a good reason, have instilled on us that there's one or two paths to make good money. And that isn't really true. For me, it's just ensuring that you have passion, and then of course that you just really work hard at it. And whether or not you're in front of the camera or behind it, I still think it's important to see Filipinos and Filipino Americans in the art and in the media scene. What we don't see a lot today are Filipinos in the art or media scene. And it's because, for a good reason, I would say, is that our parents have culturally instilled upon us that to make good money is one or two careers. And that really isn't true, especially if you are passionate and creative and hardworking at your own craft. There is no reason for you to do anything else but that. At the end of the day, if your passion isn't filmmaking, it's still important to see us Filipinos represented and supported in the arts.
Is there anything else you want to say?
Stop being nurses. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.